Now are we good?
Sound check. 1, 2, 3. Hey, lunatics. I love saying that so much. Welcome back to the trigger warning. I know. I wanted to say Lulu, Delusionals, Looney Tunes.
Oh, our little Delulus.
Delulus. Welcome back to the Trigger Warning podcast, and thank you all for tuning into our show. Again, we have continued to receive such amazing feedback regarding the show and specifically the content that we're delivering. We know that the content is a little rough, which is why it's a Trigger Warning podcast. The DMs, keep them coming in, guys, because we love answering the DMs, the emails, the instant messages, the subscriptions, and we love watching our views go up as we continue with this show. I constantly have to listen to and watch each episode over and over, because I have to listen to it like 100 times because I'm editing it. And I realize the amount of times I'm talking with my hands and saying the word and nobody knows. What do you know? Nobody knows what I'm about to say.
You know, and our hands are up and they have no clue what we're gesturing to.
Yeah. And so I'm watching these bad habits, and I know as we continue to film episodes, our quality is going to get better, our sound's going to get better, and eventually I'll stop those bad habits while filming. Right now I have one of these twist things that I'm playing with, so I'm not talking with my hands constantly. It's just,
I love that.
I watch it, and it's so ridiculous. And today we're going to be diving into topic 3 for episode 3, what should our children know?
It's so good to be back for another episode. I get so excited, like when it starts coming up and I'm like, ooh. And I love to crack out these outlines. It's one of my favorite things. I just chill on my couch.
You do an amazing job at it too.
It's like a 45-minute thing. I have a problem. Thank you, ADHD, for that hyper focus. But I'm so glad that everybody enjoyed it. I got texts from some family members and some old friends from high school, actually, and just this past weekend that they were saying they loved it and they could not wait for another episode. So thank you so much, lunatics. We love you. But let's jump into today's topic. Selena, you want to air out your dirty laundry?
Of course, I love doing that. I first noticed mental health issues in my mother's side of the family. My aunt, her sister, was diagnosed with manic bipolar depressive disorder, and she was diagnosed this well before I actually started noticing in her the mental health issues that she was experiencing. And manic bipolar depressive disorder is now bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, and both of those disorders are actually it's pretty hard for you to be diagnosed with bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 until you start recognizing whether you're hypomania or like you experience more high highs than low lows or low lows than high highs. And I actually am not sure if I have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2 at this time. I just know that I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And at the end of my aunt's marriage, she started displaying really manic episodes, and so that the word manic episodes became really well known on my side of the family because we noticed she wasn't taking care of herself. She was living out of her car with a dog, and she was showing up to our house unannounced, and I started becoming really, really embarrassed by her because at this time I was in middle school and she was showing up to my house unannounced. Even when I had friends over, she was showing up. And I think, Tori, she actually showed up one time when you were there, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. I do vaguely remember this, and I knew who your aunt was because of her children and you, obviously. And it was unsettling, I guess, to say the least, when she would show up because it happened once or twice.
I'm pretty sure it happened at one of my birthday parties, and she chased her son down the road in this manic freak out. Yeah. That was one of the craziest things I had experienced. And that being at my birthday party was it was unsettling. And she just wasn't showering because she was living out of her car. And I remember my mom making us stay upstairs, and she would take my aunt downstairs to talk to her. and because my mom just didn't want us around or didn't want us to have to deal with it. And I started calling her my crazy aunt to,
Mhm.
and that wasn't right. I didn't know any better at the time, but I kept saying to my friends, my crazy aunt, she did this and this and this. And I just remember being so embarrassed by her. And now that I look back at it, it really, it it doesn't sit with me well that I was calling her my crazy aunt, because now I know exactly what she was going through. And
Yeah.
sh she actually went missing at one point while I was in middle school, and it felt like weeks, but I think it was only 1 week that she was missing. And the whole story is just kind of crazy because it seems like she was literally just snatched right out of her house. Her phone was
Mhm.
left in her living room, her purse was in the living room, the door was cracked open, and her stuff was laying there just as if somebody came in and said, "Get out," and took her
Mhm.
away. And she was living with my cousin at the time, so her daughter came home from a friend's house, and she was a little bit on edge. She was wondering where her mom was. She called my mom and asked if anybody had heard from her. And if I remember correctly, which I don't really remember correctly, but I believe she did message my mother something pretty off the wall. And like right a couple days before this happened. And my mom didn't think
Mhm.
anything of it because she was going through a hard time. And so she after they realized like she wasn't coming back that night, a search party was they got all of their friends together and they started doing a search party. They put up flyers. They were looking everywhere for her, and not a single person had spotted her. So what
Wow.
happened was eventually she was found in the river by two fishermen, and the fishermen called 911 and brought her to the land, and she was taken to the hospital. So she explained that she had jumped off the bridge in the town that she was living in an attempt to end her life. And when you jump into water, naturally, your body, if it can swim, it's going to start to swim. So she was swimming instead of drowning. And she explained that when she jumped off the bridge, her head flew back and hit the cement and knocked her out completely. So she said that she doesn't really know how her body was able to stay afloat and start swimming because she was completely knocked out. But what actually happened was the fishermen found her attached to a log. So she was just kind of laying on a log and she was stuck. And when they took her to the hospital, she explained that during that time she was walking around the town, and she just has not a lot of recollection from those moments pre jumping off the bridge, but she did admit to several attempts of ending her life in that moment. And was she told she said that she took pills, she tried to strangle herself, and she said somebody was definitely looking out for her in those moments, because she said she should have died. She just should
Mhm.
have, and she couldn't believe that she was still alive. And after that incident, I actually never seen my aunt go back to normal. And I say normal because she was normal. She was living a normal life pre her marriage ending, and it was just so crazy to me. We started inviting her over more often to watch funny I remember we were watching Jeff Dunham comedy, and we were dying laughing, and we thought she would have a heck of like, she would love it. And she was sent back to her doctor to get put on medication. So she was so drugged up that she still at that moment really didn't know what was going on. And it sucks because I never saw the aunt that I used to know come back after that incident. And it was very, very sad. And I've experienced those high highs and low lows. And I know exactly what she was going through. I remember at times wanting to drop everything in the moment and just leave my
Mhm.
house and just go walk and have no intentions on a destination, just walk and see what happens. But because I'm so aware of my self-destructive behavior, I the only thing that I can explain when I was feeling that is just feeling so uncomfortable and not feeling
Mhm.
like I belonged in my own skin. And when I explained that to a psychiatrist, she said that and you're experiencing manic episode. And so now that I'm more aware of my self-destructive behavior, whether I'm in a high, low, or just just not even experiencing mania or depression, I know what my self-destructive behaviors are. And I have put so many hours into myself when it comes to self-reflection over the last few years. And it doesn't mean that I don't screw up. I still screw up all the time, but because I'm so much more aware with my behaviors, I know how to manage them a lot better. And because I'm diagnosed and properly treated, the medications have helped me a lot. Like up until recently, I was experiencing those fluctuations pretty often, and I just felt like I was going off the rails, and that's the only way that I
Mhm.
could explain it. But I now know what that feels like. I now know how to come to terms with those feelings and switch things up and not go off the deep end or go off the rails. And unfortunately, witnessing that behavior in my aunt and just knowing that those behaviors and that diagnosis is within my family, it didn't make me more knowledgeable that I could potentially have that illness when I grew up. And I hope more than anything, as we continue to move forward in the direction of spreading more awareness to mental health and shedding the light on truly more difficult topics and conversations in relation to mental health, that we can be more comfortable with having those conversations with our children, and so that
Mhm.
our children know what they're experiencing, or at least have an idea that what they're experiencing isn't typically a normal be isn't typically normal behavior, so that they can be more self-aware on when to get help.
Mhm. I agree completely. We have to give our kids those tools, and I think just simply letting your kids know the word for whatever emotion they're feeling is the best thing. And
Mhm.
statistics show that one out of every four people are suffering from a mental health issue. And you look at three members of your immediate family, and if you are okay, then it's probably gonna be you. Now, if you look around and they're all messed up, it's Selena's family. It's her.
Mhm. Alright. So I do not have any children of my own that don't have 4 legs. I didn't want children for the longest time because I was so worried that my mental health issues would impact my ability to be a good mother. After Mike and I had built the solid foundation of a relationship that we have today, we agreed together that we do eventually want to become parents. However, I do not want to bring a child into this world knowing that my mental health still isn't stable. And unfortunately, this is not the case for everyone who becomes a parent. Sometimes mental health issues don't become present in a person until after they have a child or become a parent, especially mental illnesses like postpartum. And postpartum depression is one of the most underrated or I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. When somebody comes to their doctor and says that they feel like they are dealing with postpartum depression, they're often slid under the rug. And that is so disgusting because postpartum depression, if left untreated, can actually lead to very more serious mental health illnesses. And it can be psychosis, and psychosis is extreme. Psychosis is a mental illness that people don't recover from, and if they do, they don't recover from that illness and be the same person they were prior to the illness. And some people can be stuck in psychosis, and the fact that that mental illness, postpartum depression, isn't taken seriously is just so disturbing, because that is something that I feel our health professionals should be more educated on, and provide new parents with more knowledge about, because that helping new parents would go a long way in preventing that diagnosis to further and then turn into something that is even worse than postpartum depression. And Tori, as somebody who suffers with mental illness and is very aware of how times are changing and works directly with children, your thoughts, your opinion, knowledge, and research is something that I can take away a lot from. And I know the one thing I wish I wish I would have known when I become a mother, is how to approach mental illness when it comes to raising children, and how you would approach, react, and respond.
And I have to piggyback off of postpartum because I think we've discussed this before. Right after I had my first child, my oldest daughter, which would have been almost 7.5 years ago now. Seven. Wow, I forgot my kid's age, just 7 years ago. I was suffering from really, really terrible postpartum, and I had a traumatic birth. I mean, I will not go into details here, but traumatic birth. And I was never once asked about my moods. I was not asked if I thought I had any type of postpartum. The doctors didn't even touch on it. And when I became pregnant, I was on a medicine that they actually took me off of because of my pregnancy. And they put me on something else. And as I'm realizing actually today, that medicine has not worked for me very well over the years. So I'm getting changed back to the one pre-pregnancy. But with my second daughter, I was asked, but it was a very nonchalant, hey, how are you feeling? Are you feeling sadder than usual? And it just felt very not genuine. And I told her nothing was done, but it was at least, hey, somebody asked. So I wish that this idea of mothers can just pick themselves up by their bootstraps and go should be done and over with, because if you're a new mother or you have been a new mother in the past, that is hard, and you cannot just pick yourself up and go. It's almost impossible. But as you have listened to our previous episodes, I do have two children. They're almost 7 and 3 years old, two girls, and I'm diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and ADHD. And previously, I've also spoken about a lot of my immediate family members struggle with those same exact mental health issues, mainly being ADHD. It runs in my family like no other. And my brother, he actually is severely ADHD, and we've known this for years. It was always something that was talked about in our family. So the one mental health issue that was actually spoken about was ADHD. And it's really hard to not speak about ADHD when it felt like my brother had to take an amphetamine every morning just so it didn't look like he was on methamphetamines. So we knew, wow, this goes right along in our family, just like, curly hair, straight hair, blue eyes, brown eyes does. And it became something that everybody was very aware of, even though I still wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 26 years old. And it was so enlightening to finally figure out, like, wow, that's what happened. That's why I do this or I do that. And I think it wasn't caught because my brother was very hyperactive. I mean, think running in circles around the house. The way our house was set up when I was a child, and you know this, you could run a circle around the downstairs, all the way from the front door around through the kitchen, living room, and then into the laundry room, my parents' bedroom, and back out because it was a giant circle. And he would just run, whereas I was more like spaced out or inattentive. And it was really hard. I just thought I was weird, like my brain didn't work, and come to find out I was ADHD. So this helps me today to understand and try to be in tune with my children's emotions and how they take on the world day to day. My children have not been specifically diagnosed with anything. I don't really assume they're going to be. It's not that I want them to be or don't want them to be, but if they are, we are going to be very accepting, especially in the family that me and my husband come from. We understand. And currently, we really try to work on emotional regulation. And if you know what emotional regulation is, great, wonderful. Practice that with yourself, your children, however you need to. But if you don't know what emotional regulation is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is regulating your emotions and trying to figure out what caused what, how we can handle it, and what can happen in the future when we have this emotion again. So we talk about having off days with my children. We don't really specify or tack down a specific mental health issue. I don't say, oh, yep, you're depressed today, because they're just not old enough for that conversation. But one thing we do is we do talk about, you know, they're sad, they're happy, they're anxious, they're nervous, they're upset, they're angry, they're furious. We give them those tools and those words so that they can understand the feeling they're feeling. And one resource that I love comes from the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses. And they have a free activity book, which I love and I personally have used, that provides information to adults and children. And it also provides activities for elementary age children, and they don't even have to have a mental health issue. It can just be a daily, what I would say is an SEL lesson, which is social emotional learning, which all children need. And there's this cute thing. It's called the Little Monster Book, which will be linked to. And it's an activity book with a little monster. And it prompts children to write and draw about their feelings. It'll show the monster and say, what is this monster feeling? Or it might give them a prompt similar to, it's raining outside and it's gray. And it shows a very sad monster, and the children can write about this, like, oh, I felt this way when blah blah blah, or I know how that monster's feeling. And it's just a really good resource for parents and children, because it can also talk about how to deal with that with the children and how to answer your children's questions.
Got to turn my sound up here. Do you know who I believe are the biggest bullies on social media?
Oh God, I don't know, who is it.
Well, it's not you, but moms in mom groups. And
Yes.
yeah, and because I don't have kids, I was going to tread lightly here on this topic because I don't want to be attacked or beaten up. But that goes against everything we stand for with this podcast. And I'm so glad that you brought up the National Alliance of Mental Illness, because you can become a member of that organization for free and receive unlimited resources. All you have to do is sign up with an email and you will get unlimited resources, news updates for anything and everything related to mental health in relation to children and adults. And because we are still so behind on studies in relation to mental health, especially with adults currently, there's constantly new information being released with new resources and updates. Unfortunately, because of that, we are still very behind on resources when it comes to mental health with children. And
Mm-hmm.
the worst part about that specific point is that if children were diagnosed and treated properly now, it would save so many people from struggling years into adulthood. And I personally believe that outside of mom groups, there are so many parents that refrain from reaching out for support in this area out of fear of being chewed up, spit out, and beaten alive over the
Mm-hmm.
internet by other parents. And more than anything, I want moms to feel more comfortable reaching out to their peers for support. And I'm so thankful to have your resources as a mother and somebody who has worked so closely with children for years. And you're not just walking the walk, you're talking the talk.
And I think another thing parents are so afraid of is labeling their child. Like, oh no, the doctor says my child's ADHD, they have anxiety, they're autistic, they're depressed. Who cares what the label is? If they get a label and it helps them, I don't think it should matter. And that's where we come back to the stigma in mental health, that it's a label. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just going to give your child the knowledge and the tools that they're going to need to get through whatever they're going through and whatever they're dealing with. And another thing is, you don't have to tell people those labels. You don't have to go out into the world on Facebook, on Instagram, and say, "Oh, my child was diagnosed with ADHD today." It does not matter. Your child can have that label and still be your child and still be the same child that you love. Um, and that's something that I just cannot wrap my mind around, is not accepting a label for your child that could help them. But additionally, on the National Alliance on Mental Illness, it does have great resources, like you said, and they're all free, which I love. But one way that they explain on there to describe mental health to your child is to equate it to an actual health issue, a headache, the flu, a broken bone. And it's so much easier for children to understand when you say, oh, well, your brain's sick. They're like, oh, okay, like I get sick, I get a cold. You can equate it to that, oh, well, your brain, it's got a cold today. It just isn't, it's feeling under the weather. It's feeling sad, or, maybe your brain tripped and stubbed its little brain toe and now there's an issue and it's just got to heal. And that's one thing that it's so important for children to understand, is that mental health is a health issue. It's not an imaginary thing inside of their head. Um, but going off of my own children, we do try that emotional regulation. And kids just don't automatically know how to handle their emotions. They don't pop out of the womb saying, oh, I know exactly how to deal with the day. This is super easy. I know how to not be sad and get frustrated. But that's absolutely not the case. Children need to be taught how these emotions can be handled, how they can be solved, issues that lead up to them and triggers can be overcome and understood. And my favorite way to help my children cope is to first help them identify the emotion. Are they scared? Are they tired, anxious, sad, nervous, and everything in between? Because one thing I've noticed, if they are 5 and under, are they tired? Are they hungry? Because that's a main thing that you can immediately tack down and solve an issue with. And the other emotions, it just makes it easier. Like, oh, I think I do. When I feel this way, it's anxious. When I feel this way, it's anger. And it's a good thing to show them those words. But after we identify that emotion, we talk about what caused it. So we're kind of working backwards. And we have the emotion, they're sad. Well, why are they sad? Well, their sister took their toy and didn't give it back. And so once we figure out what that trigger was, we can figure out how to avoid it and solve that issue in the future. If it happens again, we talk nicely, hey, that hurt my feelings. And I did not appreciate that. And giving children those tools to understand how to talk through it with themselves and other people is so important, because this can also rule out a lot of interpersonal relationship issues. And another thing we like to do, if they're just inconsolable, you cannot console a person when they're in the middle of an emotional trigger, in the middle of an emotional response. So one thing we do, we let them have that emotion. And I am big on letting kids have that emotion. Let them take 5, let them take 10 if they need to. And once they've calmed down, come back to it and talk about it. What were you feeling? Why did you feel that way? What happened right before you felt that way? And it's really, really helpful. So we've used calming techniques. We do whole body scans. I actually just did one last night with my girls at bedtime. It helps them relax. And you can just do a quick Google search to find a whole body scan. But another thing is we have a calm down corner. And in my kitchen, it is a corner kitchen table. So it butts right up to the corner. And it just happens to create this slight little cubby. It's like a little 2 by 3 foot space. And my youngest tends to get very upset. She has, I would say, worse than normal temper tantrums. I wouldn't even really call them temper tantrums at this point. There's been instances where she's upset and she's crying and she's upset, throwing things, thrashing for 45 minutes, an hour, and it's exhausting. But one thing we've realized is let them cope. She'll go into what she calls her cry corner. So of course we've adopted this name because in a way it is kind of funny. Go to your cry corner, and she can calm down, come out, and talk to us. And there's been times where that does not work. So I've had to hold my child tight in what I call a bear hug to get her to finally just relax. And I just hold her and I hold her. Sometimes I'll rock. We'll be sitting on the floor together. And I just whisper positivities into her ear. I love you. You're okay. We're okay. We're going to understand this. And it really seems to help her. And another thing is if you have a child who has these outbursts, you can get them a normal compression shirt, like a Nike, an Adidas, whatever, at a Walmart, at Kohl's, and it can really help. They could just wear it anytime they want to. They don't have to wear it when they're having that emotion, but it's like a weighted blanket, and it can help them throughout the day be able to overcome different things because they can feel that compression. But it happens. If you are a parent and you're listening to this, and you might have a child who has those larger than normal temper tantrums or meltdowns or huge emotional responses, it's hard and it honestly sucks. And what you need to do is lean on the other people in your life. My husband and I will do a thing where, hey, he's exhausted. He's had her for 30 minutes and so I take over, or vice versa. And it's something you have to figure out a routine on. Sometimes you cry with your child, and that is okay. Showing your emotions to your children can help them understand how to regulate their own as well.
I completely agree on every topic that you discussed there, Tori. You have to, a big thing that I have applied in all aspects of my life, whether my career or just things at home, arguments, etc., things that go on with my family, is you have to know the why to figure out how. You have to know A, B, and C to figure out
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, Z. You can't get to X, Y, and Z unless you know A, B, and C, unless you're standing in front of a cop and they ask you to say the alphabet backwards. And in that case, you don't want to be in that case if you don't know your alphabet backwards. But I'll tell you right now, I'm never going to learn it for the sake of that. That's for sure.
No, just handcuff me at that point and take me in because I can't do that sober. Honestly,
Yeah.
who can? If you
Yeah.
can, amazing.
People who have practiced a lot can do that sober. And it's so that if that situation ever happens, they'll know how to do it, I suppose. But you're not going to catch me figuring out how to do that just in case that situation ever happens. Because at that case, I'm just going to be like, I'll fail, breathalyze me, baby. Because there is no way we are proceeding from here. So get the breathalyzer out, okay?
I
But
love that.
another thing another thing you mentioned is compression shirts. I think that is a fantastic idea because compressing and is a way of helping somebody or something like animals feel safe. That's why
Mhm.
thunder blankets exist for animals.
Yes.
And I used to have a dog who had really bad anxiety, and I bought her a thunder vest. And when she would be freaking out, I would put that thunder vest on her, and then I would just hold her until she felt like she was calm. She calmed down, and and that translate in this translates in the same way as what you do with your children.
Mhm.
Holding them, telling them it's okay, telling them that they're safe, and those kinds of things, implementing that in your relationship with your children and making sure that they understand. They may not understand where the lash out came from, and sometimes it may not come out of hunger or being tired. Sometimes they're not going to know, and you're not going to know where it came
Mhm.
from. So coming together and holding your child and saying, it's okay, you're having feelings, your feelings
Mhm.
are valid, it's not the end of the world, we're gonna get through this, and you're gonna see tomorrow. And
Yes.
um my my little brother has autism, and with autism, excuse me, with autism in younger children, the way that it presents itself is, and I say more so boys than women, because I think women are really, really, for whatever reason I'm unsure of, I think women are really, really good at masking things,
Mhm.
and that's why they fly under the radar when it comes to these diagnoses like ADHD and autism. And so as women, we're good at masking. It's in our nature to do that.
Mhm.
But for boys, not so much. It's the complete opposite. That's why studies on ADHD were mostly all boys who were hyperactive, and never did they, not for years did they think that, oh, maybe this type of disorder presents itself differently in others, in different situations, and in different genders, and age plays a huge factor into it. So I'm glad that studies are being done now to finally show truth to those, and finally help those women who have gone under the radar because they didn't display your typical symptoms
Mhm.
of a specific diagnosis. And my brother with his autism, he had so many freak out moments uh, that I remember he had to be taken to a special school and monitored through glass by this special school. My parents were there, and he used to beat kids up, and he used to just, it could be the littlest thing that would set him off, but he'd be set off. And I also used to have to babysit my brother and sister quite often because my mom worked third shift and my father worked first shift, and it was kind of, I had to be there for the shift differential, and
Mhm.
be be that person that was there when my parents weren't there. And I just remember my brother having tantrums where he'd throw things at me, throw things at my sister. Just my sister would antagonize him and it would set him off, and I'd have to go WWE style and tackle him to the ground and kind of hold him, like I would be on top of him holding him down, and his back would be turned and I would just be laying like that on top of him.
Mhm.
Whereas now with compressing and hugging and just if I would have known better, if I would have known then what I know now, I would have approached it better. And in turn, it could have helped my parents approach it better too. He didn't need
Mhm.
to be wrestled to the ground. He just needed to be hugged, calmed down, his feelings validated, and to take what the trigger was out of the scenario. So remove my
Yes.
sister from the equation and let him calm down on his own. So you brought up so many great points in that aspect, Tori, and thank you so much for your insight on that. And just knowing that you're applying this all day long, especially with your children, but also being a professional that works with kids. And you don't just have 2 years of this behind you, you have years and years of this behind you. So it's not, you're doing it all. So
I'm just everybody's mom. That's the thing.
exactly.
You need a mom? Here I am. I'll give you a hug because that's just me. I can't help it.
It's in your nature.
It must
So
be.
that's exactly why having you here on this show explaining the things that you acknowledge in your children, you've seen from a professional standpoint, and being able to show our listeners that these things are okay. You're gonna experience these things with your kids, and it does not mean something is wrong with them. It just
No.
means they need more help than others in certain ways. That, like my brother being autistic, he was told that he'd never be able to walk, he'd never be able to drive, he'd have to live with my mom his entire life. He'd never be able to hold a job. He is doing all of those things and more. And I couldn't be more proud of him. All odds were set against my brother, and he is working his butt off. He is such a good hard worker, and he is a human GPS. So talk about not being able to drive. How about I drive and I know exactly where I'm going and from one destination to the next without a GPS. How about that?
That's amazing. I can barely get around like the county and know where I'm at. So that's just
I
phenomenal to me.
I have to use Google Maps in the town that I live in.
Okay, I'm not that
Cuz I was
bad.
I wasn't born and raised here, and it's not like the town I could get around the town that you live in with my eyes closed.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah. And your brain, like you said, your brain is an organ. So saying your brain is sick is just like having an achy stomach. Your tummy is hurting. So your stomach needs rest and your brain needs rest. And that is exactly the way that you reiterate that to your children. Your brain
Mhm.
needs help just like your tummy needs help sometimes. Your brain needs rest just like your tummy needs rest sometimes. And you just put that into perspective so well.
Thank you. I've been doing it for so long that it's become routine. Which I hate to say sometimes because there is so many new things coming out, and I grab that information as soon as I can because helping the younger generations are going to create better generations. And I think
Mhm.
one thing to improve significantly would be mental health.
Mhm. Yeah. And I truly believe that more people need to understand that we are not raising the generation of children in the same world that we grew up in ourselves. We are raising a brand new generation of children. And today, social media plays a huge part in the lives of our children, no matter what. And everybody has their own rules on how to regulate access to technology with their children. But not a single person is more right in the aspect of parenting and rules more than another parent. And I
Hmm.
just posted something kind of related to this on Twitter the other day. But one of the most common things for people to say is when it comes to parenting, my parents did XYZ and I turned out just fine. Or Jody will comment and say, this is what I did with Dylan and he turned out just fine. And then you think, oh, Jody, you're Dylan's mom? And Dylan turned out perfectly because I know I went to school with Dylan. He was 2 grades ahead of me in school. And by the time I was leaving high school, he was in that same grade. So is Dylan really fine, Jody? Is Dylan really the person you want to put up on the pedestal and give examples
Hmm.
about? Because I sure wouldn't want to. And I know for a fact that when people are reaching out for support on a topic in relation to their children, the one thing that they are hoping happens is Jody comments on this post and tells me exactly how she raised Dylan because I want little Mikey to turn out just like Dylan.
We don't want Jody.
Yeah,
Jody sounds like a terrible person.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's another thing is who we can ask
And
for help.
mhm, exactly. And in a world where we so often see people say, if you need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to me with the best intentions. I know it's got the best intentions behind it, but to turn around and go after played, excuse me, the biggest impact on our children is their mothers. Reaching
Mhm.
out for support includes being a positive aspect in every aspect of a person's life. So everyone is just doing the best they can in all aspects of life, and every single person has a lot of work that they can do in the realm of empathy. I have a lot of work that I can do in the realm of empathy. And just because you can do this or that doesn't mean that this or that isn't the right way for somebody else, given their own experience and their own situations. Our
Mhm.
world is ever evolving, and we all need to learn how to grow and evolve with it. It's so easy for so many people to hide behind a screen and spit the most cruel things and their opinion out into the world where it's not warranted. No matter what you think, your opinion does not matter as much as you think. And your opinion is not a way of being supportive to the person
Mhm.
reaching out. Unless your opinion does not matter as much as you think, unless somebody is directly asking you for your opinion on a specific topic. Outside of that, if somebody is asking for opinions from their peers, your opinion is not more important than everybody else's. And if you have nothing nice to say when somebody is reaching out for an opinion on a specific topic and reaching out to their peers, then just keep your mouth shut, because
Mhm.
nobody needs that. Teachers are not, and I want to express this, and I want this to just in your brain, like it needs to get in your brain. Teachers are not targeting your children. They are your number one support system. Teachers are not sitting there all day long thinking, okay, who am I going to target, and who am I and why? Why am I going to target that person? Teachers spend just as much time with your children as you do with your children. They are with your children from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. So they play the biggest role on your children alongside of you. So they are not the targets, they are not the enemy. They are and should be utilized as your support system.
And teachers have such a vast amount of knowledge and things that you might not even think about. Yes, they have academics. They know how to help with those academics. They know how to differentiate those academics so you can help your child at home. They might have different, when I was talking about SEL, social emotional learning, they might have different ways to help with that. A classroom can be so diverse that a teacher has to be well versed in many areas and can be a great support for a parent looking for just a little bit of help with their child.
Mhm. I completely agree. And Tori, in your opinion, who else outside of peers and teachers can be support systems for um, parents?
Doctors. Your child's doctor should be your first and foremost person, because you never know what type of underlying medical issue can be contributing to the way a child is feeling or acting. So first and foremost, a doctor is somebody you can speak to. And some people may not have access to a doctor, or maybe it's something that they don't feel comfortable bringing up to a doctor. But you can talk, as Selena said, to a teacher, a school guidance counselor. You can speak to a trusted person like your own mother. And if you don't have one of those, you can easily find the National Mental Health. A lot. Wow, that messed up. The National Alliance on Mental Illnesses is a great resource. But first and foremost, your child's doctor.
Yeah. And do not be afraid of the judgment that may come to you reaching out for support publicly to your peers, because I know for a fact, and I've been given this advice, when I become a mother, I am not going to be a part of a mom group. I'm not. And people have given me the advice not to. So if I'm reaching out for support, it's going to be publicly outside of my child's doctor. It's going to be publicly. And I hope that people have the best intentions and actually give advice where it's warranted and not their opinion. Give advice, but not your opinion. And don't tell me that, Jody, if you're listening, do not comment on my post saying that Dylan ended up fine because you put whiskey on his teeth and he maybe got a little bit drunk, so it's fine for Dylan to drink whiskey. No, I don't want
No.
that kind of advice. Like,
And Jody, for our listeners, is not a real person. So if your name is
No.
Jody, you are probably a great person.
Yeah, I don't personally know any Jodys, just so you guys know. I know a couple of Dylans, but I don't think their mom's name is Jody, and I'm not specifically talking about a Dylan that I know either. But more than anything outside of my peers, I know I will be working hand in hand with my child's teacher, because they have the right tools, the right knowledge to set your child up for success. And when I think back to the teachers that I had in middle school, there are so many teachers that come to mind that played a huge part in my life, and I still think about things that they taught me to this day. I am almost 29 years old, so I am still thinking about what teachers told me in elementary school to this day. And if it weren't for my fourth grade and fifth grade teacher, those are the years I really, really struggled. So if it weren't for those two teachers, I would not have succeeded and advanced to the next grade without them, because I was struggling so bad. I may not have ever even graduated high school if it weren't for them, because of how bad I was struggling. Teachers are there to help you, and all you have to do is reach out and trust them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you know what? If you are a lunatic and you are a teacher, we love you and thank you.
Thank you so much, teachers. And with that concludes episode 3 for the Trigger Warning podcast. And I'm going to end the episode with the same statement that I always end the episodes with. If you've survived another day at war with your brain, you are superior, and we're wishing you nothing but peace in your soul, your mind, and another day of surviving until you can find your way of living.
And we will see all of you lunatics in 2 weeks on Trigger Warning Podcast.
Thank you.